Department have repeatedly said that this is a visionary leap into the dark, and they have repeatedly compared this project with the electrification of Ireland in the past, the rural electrification and the building of Ardnacrusha. With some justification, they are comparing it in its importance, because, as we know, this will deliver fibre broadband to 56,000 farms, 44,000 businesses, 670 private primary schools, and probably a lot of private houses. But I just want to use this opportunity to point out that the key difference between what we're doing here and what we did with the electrification of Ireland and building of Ardnacrusha is that we didn't tender out, spend 18 million we've spent so far on the process of tendering out to deliver this. We didn't tender out, hire elaborate consultancy firms or engage in elaborate competitions. We constructed and instructed a state-run company with a single remit to provide a vital service to rural Ireland, and that was the ESB. And the provision was not dependent on the profit margins of some private entity. And that is a very, very important key difference, because if we were to use the model that we're using today to electrify this country, most of the country would still be in the dark, and they'd be listening to this discussion by candlelight, because it would never have worked. And I think this is the real big mistake we're making, is that we're once again, an essential service is being privatised out at a huge cost to the taxpayer, without, remarkably at the end of it, the taxpayer even owning it. I just think also, to comment on things that have been said repeatedly by the ministers, this massive concern with equality of opportunity for the people of rural Ireland is quite astounding, when you have just closed down, God knows by this stage, how many rural post offices, how many Garda stations were closed that haven't been reopened during the years of austerity, how many bus services have been disconnected to villages and towns throughout rural Ireland. And when this was happening, it was all about saving money, and now there's this big elaborate spend on rural Ireland that is being justified on the basis of equality of opportunity, that you have consistently denied rural Ireland, whether it's running down the fishing communities, putting schools, closing down schools that are needed in very rural villages and towns, and indeed hospitals and sometimes nursing homes. The idea that this is efficiency is absolutely disgraceful. And for a party like Fine Gael, who's known for its prudency in dealing with the public funds, your reputation from here on in will be utterly changed. I do want to ask you, though, a few questions on the whole scheme of things, because when we went to a briefing with the department just less than a week ago, we were told that there's been no actual study done on what the uptake would be on the rollout of broadband from individuals' homes. There's comparisons done with other studies, but no actual study done in rural Ireland as to who might take up this. And obviously, we clearly know who needs it, the 56,000 farms, the 44,000 businesses, etc. But do we know how many would uptake it, because we haven't done an actual study? We've broadband officers in every county, we've just been told, but the level of uptake is still not clear. In fact, as Robert Watt pointed out, 20,000 at least of those homes are holiday homes, and probably will not uptake the expense of having broadband brought to them. But I want to ask a couple of key questions. First of all, why you didn't take a clear study on where the uptake might come from. And second of all, a couple of legal questions. Minister, I'm sure you're aware of the legal action against ENET by Cube, against Granahan McCourt by Cube Infrastructure over the deal on the sale of the Irish Infrastructure Fund, the sale for a stake in ENET. Do you think that this might at some point, or have you been advised that this might at some point compromise this tender? And does it in any way, does it have any ramifications for what you're about to do? And the second is also on a legal question. The investigation into SiteServe is not due to be complete until March 2020, and yet we now see the company which has taken over from SiteServe, Actavo, as a key component of this consortium. Have you or any of your officials considered any implications of that site-serve inquiry into the role of Actavo in this particular consortium and the bids that you're about to or maybe not sign off on? And would you also see a problem in that the consortium that now makes up the only remaining bidder is very, very different to what it looked like at the beginning of the process? Yeah, I think that's all the questions I want to ask you for now. If there's one other I think of, Chair, if you might let me be a short question, I'll come back at it towards the end.
Okay. Minister.
Well, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge that Deputy Smith does recognise that this is a really important issue for the future of the country. I mean, as I said earlier, I've worked in a number of departments and I've just seen how this is transforming and will continue to accelerate, and it is really important. I suppose the difference now than back when rural electrification was considered was at this point we have privatised for good or ill. 20 years ago we sold off Telecom Éireann, so we sold off the core of the network. So we're in a position not of owning a network and extending it, we're in a position of seeking to provide state aid to tack onto an existing network 146,000 kilometres of cable, of fibre, and that does make a difference. I suppose the other difference is, and just to recognise that procurement law is very different.
Department have repeatedly said that this is a visionary
You do have to, if you're providing state aid, you do now have to make sure that that state aid can't be just granted to a company who is a commercial operator. It has to be an open procurement process, so there is different. I'd like to assure you that the spending by the state to date is 25 million, not 80 million, and we believe that it's important to have a robust evaluation of this because it is of such importance. I'd like to say, contrary to what you're saying, that I see huge revival in rural Ireland. I mean, I've been around the country doing a lot of projects, and I see a great new revival, and partly Michael Ring's department with the funds that he's making available, the bottom-up development that's occurring, the regional enterprise strategies that are being rolled out, the town renewal initiatives. I see a very strong revival of rural Ireland, and you know, I believe that providing a future-proof broadband will be providing the superhighway of the future to guarantee that regions, remote regions, will not be hollowed out by technology but will fully participate in technology. And I think this is really crucial to the success of rural Ireland because it will allow remote working, it will allow remote access to really important public services. So, you know, I think I see a different view, and I see this as a really important future-proofed investment for the work. In terms of the studies that the department have done, obviously we've looked at international precedents, and we've looked also at what's happening in urban Ireland, and we believe that in principle we must make available the same level of service to urban and rural, that we need to see access to this digital technology on the same basis in urban and rural, at the same price, at the same connection charge. So there is a principle here that we want to see this achieved. And I have no reason to believe, and the department has no reason to believe from the evaluations that have been done, that the appetite for uptake of this will be any different in rural Ireland than in urban. Where networks are available online and people can get high quality broadband, the take-up is 65% at the moment, and we believe that that is prevalent. So there isn't the basis for believing that, you know, there is some low level of interest and that this would be an that we are making an investment that doesn't matter in the future. I think we've done studies, we've based on international. Like what we've done in all of these cases is look at international benchmarks to see what stands up to scrutiny, and we've done that work. In terms of any legal actions or investigations, we are confident that none of those will have an impact on the rollout of the National Broadband Plan.
Including the investigation into SciServe, which will be concluded by March 2020.
Yes.
Smith, you had a final question, you said, just very briefly. Thank you.
When we were at the presentation by your department here, one worrying thing emerged in relation to the construction of the National Broadband Ireland company, and that was that the state would have one representative on the board of 9. One person would represent the state, but what wasn't clear was what would be the role of that person. Would the interests of the role of that person be the state and the people, or would it be the company itself? And that was not cleared up. I think that's very important that we know, because we've seen from the outcome of the debacle of the National Children's Hospital, which interestingly is almost completely forgotten about because this has superseded it and has become the issue of the day. But we know from that the one person that represented the state on the board of the construction of the National Children's Hospital was accountable to the board and to the company rather than to the state, despite the huge spending of public money. So that's, I think, a serious question of public interest.
Thank you, Deputy. I might just let the Minister...
Yeah, no, the position in relation to this company is that it will be a company that is a standalone company. It will be regulated in huge detail, and its primary element will be to deliver the governance commitments that we have entered into it under the contract. So every member of the board will have an obligation to deliver the state, the delivery to the state under the terms of the contract. And we've written this contract in huge detail to make sure we have access to the auditing, that they deliver on time, that it is rolled out in a certain way. So we're very confident that not only have we that governance, but by having a representative on the board, we will have someone who is overseeing the public interest, which is at the heart of the contract that's been negotiated. So this is different from, say, having a public interest director on a bank whose job is to service its shareholders. This company is set up to service this contract, and we have set out in triplicate what that means. So our public interest representative will be overseeing not only their role, but the whole role of the company is to honour this contract. So we're confident.
Your department officials can now clarify that for us less than a week later, when they couldn't clarify it.
What I'm saying is that the contract binds this company in every respect, and it has detailed reporting obligations, audit requirements, delivery requirements, and the representative on the board will be making sure that those important governance commitments that apply to all board members and apply to the company are delivered. So, of course, this person is going to be at the core from a public interest directive to make sure that the company honours all those obligations, but those are obligations of this company. It's a different situation from a bank who has obligations to, a whole lot of different...
I think there is an ambiguity, Minister, and I think because that ambiguity exists, you should be obliged to publish the contract, because this is serious public expenditure, and that contract should be published in full so we can... The
contract will be published in full when it is finalised, but what's clear is we've already published all of the synopsis of the contract, all of the details of the various items that have to be overseen, the audit requirements in respect of when a contingency sum could be called upon. The detail of this contract is immense in terms of the specified obligations of the company. And I think that's something that you need to bear in mind, that this is not just a director on a company that is floated off out there with its own interests. This is a company dedicated to deliver a project where they have huge obligations imposed upon them.
Thank you. Deputy Eamon Ryan.